Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar sponsored by Hamilton Captel. I'm Catherine Sutherland, and I will be the moderator for today. I am the chief editor of the Hearing Review. We have cart captioning available for this presentation. You can find the link in the chat box, and this will open a new window inside in your browser. The title of our webinar is The Next Wave of Hearing Care, OTC Hearing Aids and Emerging Technologies. The presentation will last 45 minutes, and there will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, which will be about 15 minutes. Please add your questions to the chat box, and they will be shared with the presenters at the end of the webinar. Before I get started with the introductions of our presenters, I would like to show you a brief video from our sponsor, Hamilton Captel. Our presenters today are Dr. Amy Sarow. She is the lead audiologist at Soundly.com, a consumer education resource for those with hearing loss. She obtained her Doctor of Audiology degree at the University of Iowa and spent her fourth-year residency at the Mayo Clinic School of Health Sciences in Jacksonville, Florida. In addition to her clinical work, she promotes hearing healthcare and patient education in digital media outlets, podcasts, and publications, and is a Forbes Health Advisory Board member. Richard Einhorn is a music producer and engineer, a composer, and a hearing technology consultant. He is a summa cum laude graduate of Columbia University in music. Richard has produced and engineered hundreds of recording sessions and over 30 albums of classical music. He was awarded a Grammy for Best Instrumental, producing Yo-Yo Mama's Bach Cello Suites. He has also produced Voices of Light, a silent film that became a best-selling Sony classical recording. After experiencing sudden sensorineural hearing loss in June of 2010, Richard began fashioning unique solutions using professional and consumer technology to help him and others with hearing loss hear better. With that, I would like to introduce our first presenter, Dr. Amy Sarow.
All right, well, thanks so much for the introduction. And so first, I'm just gonna start by just sharing a little bit about Soundly. So Soundly started around about a year ago now. We've been just at the 1-year mark, and it started with supporting consumers and patients around the hearing healthcare space. And especially, just prior to the OTC launch in October of this last year. So our goal is to help support patients in their first 5 to 10 hours in their hearing health journey. So from the time they decide, okay, it's time to do something about what I'm experiencing, and then to support them with good information. So for example, the difference between OTC and prescription products. So that's just a screenshot of the website there. What about cochlear implants or other ear health topics? We also provide product reviews and then other supportive features like live listen and a new AI support feature if they have specific questions, a hearing test, and then a variety of articles as well. So we'll be drawing from some of that experience for this presentation. So this is just an outline of what we'll be getting to here. So first, we'll just talk briefly about what are OTC hearing aids and the hearing screening process, advantages and disadvantages of these products, availability of OTC hearing aids, and then 3 options for hearing health care, over-the-counter, direct-to-consumer, and prescription, a little bit of an update of how things have shifted or changed since October of this past year, and then just a few take-home points there. As many of us know, this is a big topic right now in the hearing health space, and we've got a variety of different products available, different form factors available as well. Some of them are behind the ear, some of them are in the ear product, and a lot of them are operated by an app. You can see there's a woman there using an app. So what are these products? Well, we can think of it as a self-care pathway. So the FDA provides some guardrails and intended usage. So they're considered an FDA cleared class 2 medical device, and they are meant for people who are experiencing mild to moderate hearing loss. They're also for adults, so not for children. And they do have a limited maximum output of that 117 dB SPL. The products are required to have adjustments in volume, treble, bass, and also have a self-fitting algorithm. All right, so who should not get an OTC hearing aid? So they are meant for a certain subcategory of people with perceived hearing difficulty, but they're not meant for anyone under the age of 18, so not for children, not for someone with a sudden change to their hearing loss or unilateral or asymmetric hearing loss. Those individuals should always get medical clearance. They should go to see an ENT when that happens, of course. And then anyone who has a mild to moderate hearing loss or an atypical configuration, perhaps a rising, not that typical sloping hearing loss, they're probably not going to be best served with this type of device. Anyone who has a challenging ear canal geometry, perhaps they need a more custom fit. Of course, anyone who has chronic drainage, ear surgical history, infections, or other medical situations there. Someone with poor dexterity, probably this is not the best option for them. If they're not comfortable with technology, using a smartphone or an app, probably not the best. And someone who prefers an in-person care model and support. So there are a variety of hearing screening options that you may have heard about or seen before. Now, of course, I should mention that these are intended as screenings, and it does not replace an in-person comprehensive hearing evaluation by a hearing healthcare professional. Some of the options out there that you may know about, there's these frequency tests. Those are meant more for entertainment purposes, really. They're saying, how old are you based on what frequencies you can hear. So those are the frequency tests. Pure tone test, these are they're similar to what you would have in the clinic. Of course, they're not able to have bone conduction testing through this type of a test or screening. However, they're similar in that regard. Speech and noise testing is useful information to have, but it's not useful necessarily when we're thinking about, how severe is my hearing problem? Do I need to see someone? So some of these tests, this is a good first step for someone who feels they have a hearing problem. Maybe they're feeling a little bit anxious about the process and they want to see some information about what their hearing status is before they go into the clinic. So for those who are wanting to do this type of a test, of course, it's not going to rule out a middle ear pathology. If they have any medical concerns, they should always see a professional. But this will give them a starting point. So you'll always want to follow instructions when taking any of these types of screening measures. So you'll want a good pair of headphones, be in a quiet space, and then they'll be accessing the test through a computer or a phone or perhaps a tablet. And the tests are set up in different ways. Of course, calibration is an important part of an assessment, and some of them do have fairly sophisticated calibration methods, but anyone should be following the instructions when they're taking this. This is just an example on the Soundly website. It's purely educational. It's not tied to any brand or anything, but patients can go on here and see, do I have a hearing problem? And if so, should I be following up with someone? Of course, I would always recommend if someone's never had a hearing test before and this is their first time checking that, they should always see a professional. Okay, so let's talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of this type of technology. So as audiologists, we know that real ear measurements, of course, are the gold standard. However, with this new technology, on the market, let's just talk about some of the pros and cons. So for consumers, maybe think about affordability, convenient access. If somebody lives in a rural area, perhaps they're not close to a hearing clinic, or they're having maybe difficulty accessing for other reasons. It could be a good option for someone with mild to moderate hearing loss. They have good dexterity. They're able to operate a smartphone. Maybe they're just wanting this for situational use or just to get started. Now, of course, some disadvantages would be there isn't a person who's going to be there hands-on with them. So there's not someone who's going to be able to look in their ears to show them, you know, push this button or go through these steps. A lot of this technology will not be as sophisticated in background noise. And Bluetooth or streaming options are not available on all of the OTC devices. So if that's a really important feature, that's something to note as well. And then there aren't any custom hearing aid options. So, you know, having an ear mold made custom to fit their ear, or like an ITE hearing aid, of course, something like that. Also of note, so OTC can see a higher return rate, and potentially that's due to, you know, the self-fitting process. There's not a professional who's assisting them in the adjustment process, but in some cases, patients, they start here and they realize, well, maybe this isn't for me, and they'll return it, and then they go on to pursue another option that can provide them more benefit. The availability of these devices, so you've probably heard about some of these as well. You can purchase some in a local pharmacy like CVS, Walgreens. There's some options available on Walmart, and then the manufacturer's websites as well. Okay, and now I'm going to go through a few different models. So right now we have essentially 3 different options for patients who are considering hearing healthcare today. So there's over-the-counter, there's a telehealth sort of hybrid option, and then you can of course see a local provider in person at an audiology clinic in your area. So I'm going to talk about 3 different patients. Now, of course, these are not their real pictures and also not their real names, but we'll just give you some examples here. So we'll start with Richard. So Richard has been struggling lately. He's been turning up the TV pretty loud. His wife's getting frustrated, and he struggles in some conversations, but he's just not sure yet, you know, should I go in to see someone? Maybe there's another option I can try. So he decides to try an OTC device. And these are the steps that he follows after he purchases that device. So he takes it out of the box, and then in the box there's a manual that he reads to learn, you know, what are the steps I need to follow. Then he takes out his phone and downloads the app and pairs the device to his phone. On the phone, it has this adjustment capability here where he can adjust the volume, he can adjust the treble and the bass. And so he adjusts that to make it comfortable so that when he's watching TV, the volume is comfortable for him, and his wife's a little bit happier. Now, he did encounter some problems, you know, with Bluetooth, maybe with something else going on with the device. So he called the customer service, and on the phone, they walked him through what to do about that. And that was his experience with an over-the-counter product. Now, next, I'm going to Susan. So Susan has been struggling lately, and she knows that she needs to do something, but she's feeling a little bit apprehensive about going to a clinic in person for whatever reason. She just isn't sure, I don't know if I'm ready to do that just yet. So she decides to go with this hybrid telehealth option. Now, some of these require an in-person test that they then receive, and they program the devices. They have different ways that they go about programming these, but she took a test, and then these devices were programmed to her audiogram from the test results. And so she received them in the box, took them out, and she connected them to her phone by following the instructions that they gave her. And then she scheduled this onboarding appointment with her provider, which you can see there on the screen. And they made some adjustments to her settings, and she's able to have follow-up visits when she needs to have those adjusted. Now, of course, there isn't an in-person component to this, so luckily she has some skills and is able to navigate, the technology and is okay with that. Okay, and then we get to Jean. So Jean has a hereditary hearing loss. She has more of that cookie bite. She has trouble understanding people, especially around the COVID-19 time when people were wearing masks and it was just harder for her to participate in conversations. But fortunately, her brother, who also has this type of hearing loss, recently saw a person, an audiologist in person, and he's been doing much better and he's really happy with his hearing aids. So she decided, you know what, I think it's time for me to do something about my hearing difficulty. So she went into that local clinic where her brother received his. And after her hearing test, they took some ear impressions and they created custom ear molds for her. Then a few weeks later, she came in for her hearing aid fitting, and her local audiologist fit her using the gold standard with real ear measurement. And then those hearing aids were set to a level that was comfortable and appropriate for her. She's able to follow up, of course, in person and have support and any adjustments that she needs. And she's very happy with how things are going. So that just gives you an example of 3 different situations. Each of these patients is experiencing some hearing difficulty, and they've decided to pursue treatment options on their own terms. Okay, so as many of us know, since October of last year, OTC entered the market. And so what's happened since then? Well, I know I was recently at AAA last month, and I know there's a lot of talk about this topic, of course, as well. And I think a lot of us are noticing that there's certainly an increased interest in hearing healthcare. We're just seeing more conversation around the topic of hearing health in general. So I know there was also a survey from a publication where they asked people about their behaviors around healthcare. So for example, how often do you go to the dentist? How often do you see primary care or other medical visits? And I think they mentioned that it's more likely actually for a person to maybe to take their dog or cat to the vet than it is to go get their hearing checked or think about their hearing healthcare. So I know as an audiologist, I'm really excited to see just more conversation, more discussion around this topic. Certainly things are changing and they will continue to change in the next couple of years. But we're seeing an increase in the number of prescription products that people are pursuing. And perhaps that's because OTC, people see it as a doorway or a place where they can start a conversation, and maybe that's not where they stay, or maybe they try them and they realize, that's not what I need necessarily, but it gives them a place to start. We certainly see a greater need for audiology to support those patients in general. And so some final points that I would mention here. For anyone, if there's a patient who's thinking about, is OTC right for me? These are some questions that I would want them to consider. So what type of hearing difficulty are you having? Is it like, Richard, is it just with the TV? Maybe an assistive device or something might help there. Or are you having trouble in general? What types of difficulty are you having? Are there any complexities to your situation? As I mentioned, is there a complex ear anatomy or dexterity concerns or anything else where they may need additional support? Is self-fitting an appropriate option? So are they able to manage a smartphone or other technology, and are they able to set that for themselves? Are they independent and able to do those things? What type of support do they have? Is there someone, let's say they're not great with technology, but they want to try this option. Do they have a family member who can help them? Or if they're needing support with putting the device in their ear, an in-person clinic is going to be probably the best option there. And then also, it's important for consumers or anyone who's considering over-the-counter to know what the return policy is, because sometimes they'll try these options and sometimes they'll help and sometimes they won't, but it's important to know what options they have. So if they do decide to return them and pursue prescription care, they'll know how to go about that. Okay, so that is my presentation, and I thank you so much for listening, and I hope that this was helpful.
Thank you, Amy. It was a wonderful presentation. I'm going to switch presenters, and we're going to have Richard give his presentation.
Okay, great. All right, I'm going to talk about the next wave, emerging technologies from current ALDs to Bluetooth LE audio and Auracast, and I'll explain all this terminology as I go along. I just wanted to give you a general idea of my background, a little bit more from what Catherine said. I'm a music producer. I've worked on mostly in classical music. These are two of the major artists that I've worked with, but I've also worked, in addition to Glenn Gould and Yo-Yo Ma, with other people that you might have heard of, like the Philadelphia Orchestra, the New York Philharmonic, and Philip Glass, Meredith Monk, and a whole bunch of other people. In addition to this, I'm also known as a composer. My music gets performed all over the world. This is a very large piece for chorus, orchestra, and silent film called Voices of Light that has been done everywhere from Disney Hall in Los Angeles to the Sydney Opera House to Geffen Hall, et cetera, et cetera. In 2010, I developed a sudden sensory neural hearing loss, and because I had pre-existing problems with the conductive hearing loss, otosclerosis, I fell overnight into the world of hearing health and hearing health technology. I started to realize that because of my background in audio technology, I started to realize that the current solutions back then were barely adequate compared to what I knew was possible with the technology that I'd been using most of my life. So I became a public advocate and have been writing articles, doing presentations, consulting with various companies, both here and in Europe, on hearing health technology. I'm a member of the Hearing Loss Association of America and was a member of the board and became board chair for a couple of years as well. Amy gave you a really excellent presentation about OTC hearing aids, and hearing aids are essential. They're absolutely essential for me and for many, many other people, but sometimes hearing aids aren't enough. As the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine wrote, even well-fit hearing aids may not necessarily improve speech recognition in noise. There are a lot of reasons for this, a lot of technical reasons, but the bottom line is that there are times when hearing assistive technologies, in other words, technologies, audio technologies other than hearing aids, can be really, really helpful for people with hearing loss, for people like with my hearing loss or worse. So with that as a background, I'm just going to briefly introduce you to our topics. I'm first going to talk about some typical assistive listening devices, or ALDs. Now, there is no way anybody can go through all the devices that are out there and all the styles. So if your favorite device is not here or you notice an exception, it's because I simply couldn't cover all the devices that are out there. Now, all of these devices have their issues, and this is one of the reasons why things have been evolving so quickly. And they've been evolving basically in the field of wireless connectivity. And we go from Bluetooth, which you probably have heard of, to Bluetooth LE, low energy, which you may have heard of, to a brand new standard called Bluetooth LE audio. And I'm going to talk about that. And part of the Bluetooth LE audio standard that's really important for those of us with hearing difficulties is Auracast. and I'll be talking about its benefits. I speak only as a user, not as a, not in any way in terms of a manufacturer or hearing health professional. My only interest in these technologies is whether or not I can use them, whether or not my friends can use them, or whether or not the larger group of people with hearing loss and hearing challenges can find them useful. So, and I believe very strongly that these latest developments in LE audio and with Auracast holds really profound changes in the relatively near future. So without any further ado, let's talk about assistive listening devices. There's two basic categories. There are personal assistive listening devices, and then there are public. So let's talk a little bit about the personal listening devices first. The most basic one are these simple handheld devices, like the one that the gentleman is holding in his hands, which are hooked up to a pair of headphones. It's basically a microphone and an amplifier, and it's very, very simple and very useful and very inexpensive. It doesn't have very good sound. It's not very flexible, but they are very handy in a pinch, and in pinches such as emergency situations when you're dealing with a doctor or in an accident or something like that. A more sophisticated device that you might come across is a proprietary, more or less, wireless microphone. The reason I call them proprietary is that these typically are paired to and only work with one brand or one model of hearing aid or cochlear implant. And they have a bunch of positive things about them. They can be very effective. They're well integrated. In other words, many of them just simply work in a way that's very easy for the user to use, but they have a lot of disadvantages as well. They're very expensive, especially when you start tacking on these multiple $100 devices to to things that to the cost of a hearing aid that you've already spent quite a bit of money for. They're unusual. Very few people have seen them in public, so they tend to stand out and be obtrusive in that they are really very kind of stigmatizing a little bit. People don't know what you're doing. They feel you might be interviewing them or forcing you to wear a device that they don't really understand. They are proprietary, and what that means is that if you have a hearing aid from manufacturer X and you have a microphone from manufacturer Y, then it is usually impossible for you to use the microphone from manufacturer Y with the hearing aid from manufacturer X. This particular device can sort of be used with a bunch of different brands of hearing aids, but in fact it is very difficult to do that. And in my experiments with this device, I've never been able to reliably get it to work with any other with any real other brand of hearing aid other than the one it was originally designed to be used for. Now, in addition to personal devices, there are assistive listening devices for TV. Many of you have probably seen these stethoscope technologies, and they have, as far as I'm concerned, exactly one advantage, which is that they are marketed to the hearing health community, so we all know about them, but they are really, really uncomfortable. The sound leaks out of them. They can't really be worn with hearing aids. They also don't have very high quality sound when compared with the average typical product that you can buy over the counter in, at Best Buy or some other retail store. In addition to that, there are devices that will work with your hearing aids or cochlear implants, and these are proprietary TV adapters. This is a typical one, and they are effective. They're very well integrated. Some of them simply work when you enter the room if the TV is on, and they connect automatically to your hearing aids. But they too have disadvantages. They are expensive, and again, they're proprietary. If you have hearing aid X, then you must use TV adapter X from the same company. If you change hearing aid brands, you're going to have to buy a new adapter, and that's kind of adding insult to the injury of having to spend multiple thousands of dollars. Now you have to spend an extra several $100s in order to hear your TV again. From the standpoint of a consumer, it makes zero sense. So now there is another technology that's very important for personal hearing assistance, and that is hearing apps for mobile devices. There's no way I can talk about the vast breadth of them, but I'll talk about what I think is the most important one, which is one that's only available on the iPhone, and it's called Live Listen. This will allow you, with a made-for-iPhone hearing aid, to use your iPhone as a remote microphone. It works quite well. It works actually as a directional microphone, and I've used it quite often in restaurants. I was using it last week when I was in a very noisy restaurant, and it integrates extremely well with a person's iPhone. It's very effective, well integrated, easy, it's free, it uses familiar text, smartphones, and hearing aids or cochlear implants, but it too has issues. The sound quality is very poor. It really is substandard. There is a delay when you hear your own voice, so there's an echo that you need to get used to. It's only available on iOS, and it's an incomplete solution. There really is no way to handle the sound level of your own voice, so you end up shouting quite often when you're using this, which can be very embarrassing. So now I'm just going to briefly turn to assistive listening devices in public. If you are at a mega church like this, and yes, this actually is a picture of a mega church, if you're there, it is nearly impossible, no matter how good the sound system is, if you have a hearing loss, to be able to hear well. You really need some kind of specialized assistance. These are the typical kinds of receivers that you can obtain at the venue when you go to a place in order to hear, like at a megachurch, at a church, or at a theater, or at a concert. These are FM or infrared, and these are two different styles. One goes over the ear, and you can, in some cases, wear your hearing aids with them. The other ones go in your ear, and they have all the problems of discomfort of and also of the other stethoscope style, and you also can't really wear your hearing aids with them. So the pros are that the sound quality is not bad. They can get very good. They are available, and they're pretty easy to use. You basically just pick them up from the dispenser at the venue, you put them on, and that's the end of the story. But they have considerable issues. They are very stigmatizing. Everybody knows you have a hearing loss. You're wearing a very strange device. And one of the most unfortunate things about it is you typically need to hand over some sort of an ID in order to use it. And that ID is usually your driver's license. And once I forgot to pick up my driver's license when I handed it in, and drove 100 miles without my driver's license until I realized what I had done, called the venue, and got my license back. In addition to that, they're prone to feedback, which can disturb you and everybody around you. A far better solution are hearing or induction loops. And hearing loops are basically, from the standpoint of the user, if your hearing aid or cochlear implant is compatible with hearing loops, you flip a switch, you're done. You are connected to the hearing loop in the venue, assuming the venue has one, and you're done. You can hear quite well through your own hearing fitting, and it's quite good. The pros are that it's very dignified. Nobody needs to know that you have a hearing problem. It's universal. If you're in Australia or in Indonesia or in Iowa, you're using exactly the same technology, and it's remarkably easy. But hearing loops have issues. They're mono, and the world is, you know, a lot of things in public places are stereo or are you know, in surround. They're very rare. They're hard to find in the United States, although there are more, there aren't that many. They're very expensive to install properly. They do require specialized maintenance. And unfortunately, many hearing aids, roughly, I don't know, roughly a third to a little bit close to a half, don't have telecoils, aren't equipped for hearing loops, and so you basically can't use them. So by now, it should be quite obvious. Assistive listening really can be improved. And in addition to that, much more is possible. But unfortunately, right now, it really isn't practical. And I thought I'd give you just one simple example of the kind of experiments I've run with the technology that I know to give you an idea of what is possible. And this is the classic problem, which is listening well in a crowded restaurant. I've solved it, at least for myself and for just about anybody with moderate to severe hearing loss. So profound hearing losses, I'm not sure it would work. All it takes is for you to drag to the restaurant about $10,000 in theater sound technology, have an expert set it up for you, hand everybody headsets with microphones, and that's it. You can enjoy your fine French restaurant with a bunch of good friends. And if you have a very serious hearing loss like the one I have, you won't be able to notice that there was ever any problem. You will be able to hear perfectly, your friends will be able to hear beautifully, and everybody is quite happy. The only problem is, who has $10,000 and an expert to drag around to fine French restaurants whenever you want to dine out properly? Nobody does. So now we get into the whole issue of improving assistive listening technologies. And we start by of course, having wireless technologies, and that brings us inevitably to Bluetooth. And Bluetooth has the potential to consumerize hearing health in really, really profound ways. The current version of Bluetooth is now rebranded Bluetooth Classic. And it is the Bluetooth that you know and love. Bluetooth is just simply a wireless standard for connecting devices together. It's ubiquitous. It's used in billions, literally billions of devices. It has very good to great sound quality depending on various options that manufacturers can include in it. It's very reliable, especially for consumer uses, but it has some disadvantages. At the moment, it is one-to-one only. The only thing that you can do with Bluetooth Classic is pair one device to one transmitter to one receiver. There's no broadcast capability, so it can't be used for public hearing assistance. It's often very difficult to set up, and it's an energy hog. It's also very old tech. It's got a lot of hacks in it that have been used to extend its usefulness. So because it's really not possible to use with hearing aids because it uses so much energy, the hearing aid manufacturers basically hacked Bluetooth, as did Apple, to a low energy standard called Bluetooth LE. It's not an audio spec, but they hacked it to have audio, and it provides audio connectivity to smartphones. This is the so-called made for iPhone hearing aid. It works most of the time. It has low energy usage, but unfortunately, it has mediocre sound at best. It's very difficult to set up and maintain because it's a hack. And many hearing aids only connect to phones and tablets, not computers, although that may change soon with a new update to Mac OS. And it's still one-to-one only. That is, one device can only pair to one other device. So enter a brand new standard called Bluetooth LE Audio. And Bluetooth LE Audio is a complete rewrite based on Bluetooth Low Energy of the Bluetooth standard for connecting wireless devices together. Once it's implemented fully, there will be significantly improved wireless functionality functionality and reliability. There'll be less delay in the system throughout. There'll be far better handling of stereo, and very importantly, it won't be a hacked protocol. It won't be a hacked standard. So it will be much easier to maintain and much more reliable. There will be less battery drain than in Bluetooth Classic, and it will have vastly superior sound quality, really excelling a CD's sound quality. In addition to that, it will be extended range. Bluetooth right now goes for about 30 feet before the signal starts to decay. LE Audio will go for 100 feet. There's also going to be significantly improved hearing aid cochlear implant integration. In fact, it was begun, LE Audio was begun by a proposal from hearing aid manufacturers. So there should be very tight integration with the two. And there will be new capabilities to share sound. And sharing sound is what Auracast is all about. And briefly, Auracast has transmitters, all sorts of different kinds of transmitters. Of course, your phone will be a transmitter, a TV could be a transmitter, but also a public address system can be a transmitter. And that is the most important aspect of Auracast. You have the ability to broadcast one to many. You can go from one transmitter to multiple receivers. You'll have new, very high sound quality public assistive listening, better sound quality than even the best FM or infrared or loop systems available today. And there's a potential to spark innovation in personal assistive listening devices because the technology is so flexible. And here we see that issue of a single transmitter or a single type of transmitter can go to all sorts of different devices. The same transmitter can go to hearing aids, to earbuds, to headphones, to headsets. Now, there are basically, there are different ways that you'll be able to use Auracast. One way you'll do is you'll see Auracast streams available on an app on your smartphone, and you'll just be able to choose that Auracast stream. For example, a gate announcement at an airport. You see gate 35, that's your gate, you choose it, and you'll be able to hear your gate's announcements directly in your hearing aids or in your earbuds. Or in some cases, you'll be able to connect directly to your hearing aids or earbuds. For example, in a movie theater, you just go into the movie theater, you flip a switch on your hearing aid that enables Auracast, and it connects you directly to the sound system of the movie theater. So that is really quite exciting. Now, there are a lot of benefits to Auracast. It will lower stigma because everyone's going to be using the same tech. It will use familiar consumer technology integrated with prescription devices. It will be universal everywhere, the same thing. It's non-proprietary. No longer do you have to buy new devices if you change hearing aid brands. There are fewer incompatibilities. It's inexpensive to install and maintain. It's superior and personalized sound quality possibilities, and there's potential for ubiquitous use in airports, trains, and even bars. There's a potential to develop advanced restaurant hearing solutions, which I can talk about. And there's innovation driven by the immense consumer level economies of scales. Those billions of devices really provide an incentive to do something. So now the big question is, when will it happen? And the transition is going, devices have already started to appear, and there are already rumors that hearing aids will happen later this year. At least one loop company that I know of is working on hybrid loop Auracast transmitters, which will likely be released in the last quarter of 23, the first quarter of 24. But wide adoption is going to take a long time. The best estimates for ubiquitous Auracast, in other words, for it to be everywhere, are 5 to 10 years. And those are reasonable. However, if widespread consumer adoption occurs, in other words, if this catches on with regular consumers, Auracast could become widespread far sooner. And basically, that's it. thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity to present and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Richard. That was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
For our audience, thank you so much for joining us today. Richard Einhorn and Amy Sarow do have their contact information in the online version of the announcement for this webinar. We will have this recorded and online at the Hearing Review website within the next week or so. If you have friends or colleagues that you would like to share this presentation with, please let them know. It will be available for all to see shortly. I believe that then will conclude our webinar for today. Thank you so much to our speakers, and thank you for joining us at the Hearing Review webinar.